asleep on the job on this one and left the members of the community of disabled persons to struggle. I am calling on the ministry. I am calling on the ministry to set the effect. You are the government now. Don't tell me about I was there 2 years ago. I won government at a time. You are the government now. Do it now. And I'm calling on you. Yes. Don't tell me that it's 2004. Yeah, that's excuse. And I am calling on you because you have a good heart. You have a good heart to set the effective date. Set the effective date for the legislation to come into being. I now say a few words, Mr. Speaker, about the farm work program, because there are some issues there. The farm work program. It has been going on for over 70 years. I know a lot about it. I spent a lot of time modernizing it, etc., etc. The maximum age to go on the farm work is 45. When I was the Minister of Labour, it was 40, and I raised it to 45. The Prime Minister born, what, 22nd of July, 1972, you were born? July 22, that means you're 46. You couldn't go on the farm work program. No, you couldn't go. They said that you're too old to go. I am recommending to you, I am recommending to you, seriously, Minister, to consider raising the age of the farm work program to 50. Because there are a lot of strong men and women in Jamaica. You could go because you cannot work. You have never worked hard yet. Are you too lazy? Mr. Speaker, I am recommending to the Minister of Labour to raise the farm work age so that other 50-year-old men and women can go on the farm work program. Also, I am recommending, Minister, I'm recommending to you, the opposition recommending to you, every farm worker from all over Jamaica have to head to East Street for medical. As the Prime Minister said, you're in opposition, so you have time to think and reflect and come up with new ideas. That is what opposition is for, you know. Think and think and think and come with new policy. So we're better prepared the next time around and better than you. So we have come with a program now. We are recommending that you use a medical facility in Western Jamaica so the people from Negril and Petersfield and Falmouth and all those places can do their farm work medical down there. Think. We've been thinking. The liaison service. I'm almost finished, Mr. Speaker. The liaison service. There's a liaison service in the United States, in Canada, that is supposed to look after the welfare of the workers. The welfare of the workers. They are not there on their own. They are provided with housing, traveling, and I think interest-free motor vehicle loans. We instituted that long time. You cannot have a liaison service where you have liaison officers, and for 2 years that officer has not brought in one new job to the service, to Jamaica. Or you have people in a farm. Each liaison officer is assigned an area, like in Leamington. And I say I know a lot about it. I went to open my office in Leamington when I was Minister of Labour, still there, because that was where the jobs were. When I left Leamington in Ontario, the next week, Vincent Fox, from President of Mexico, was there to open an office because we're taking away the Mexican jobs. You know how it goes. You have a farm with women in Strawberry, and for 7 months, the liaison officer has not visited the farm where the women are. Is that right? I'm saying to you, Minister, look at it. Talk to them and make them start to work. Let them start to work. Because some of them are not working, and you know that. I said you have liaison officers. Mr. Speaker,
Order, please.
I now move to the part program.
Order, please.
The part program. I'm just making 2 recommendations.
Members, please give the member an opportunity to proceed. Go ahead, Mr. Daly.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, something else has emerged with our H-2B workers. And for those of you who don't know what it is, those are the workers who go to hotel, they go to work in factories in the United States, H-2B visas. Because of corruption and the cap that President Trump has put in, many of our workers who go each year cannot go because the cap is raffled. You can engage people on the Hill, Capitol Hill. You can go and talk to them because we have done it in the past to exclude the returning workers from the cap. We don't talk about things that we don't know about. These are things that we know about because we used to do it. I'm saying to the minister, take your delegation to the Hill, talk to the people up there, and see if they can exclude, try win something for the workers of Jamaica. Do it. The PART program, Mr. Speaker, I move to a very topical issue. The PART program. I have 2 letters here. See them here? In the last several weeks, a lot of citizens, mothers, old people been receiving these letters. Letters say, our records show that your family has been receiving cash grant under the PART program for over 4 years. This is one for a little baby, 4-year-old. You're on the PART program for over 4 years. Please visit our office in Maypen, and what. If you don't do it, you will not receive any further benefits. Let me hear. All MPs have seen them. Every MP has seen. Who said that? Put up your hand if you see that. No. Hold on. I'm telling you what is happening now. Now. I'm saying to the Minister of Finance, and I'm saying to the Prime Minister and to the Minister of Labour, don't spite the children because they have done 4 years. They are still 7. Don't do that. Don't do it. There's a lady, Miss Pearl. When Miss Pearl received the letter, on the 17th of May, she got the letter from the post office. She was supposed to have gone down to Maypen before the 30th of April. When she got the letter, she dropped down. She fainted. It's government policy. And I'm saying to you, here is the proposal. Here is what I'm giving.
Just fix the problem rather than point fingers of who to blame.
Prime Minister, this was not our policy. This was not the policy of the People's National Party administration. It was not. It was not. And let me tell you what you need to do. I said, we have been there. We have been there. We have taken off people off food stamp. In fact, I work to change the food stamp. So we know what it means. And I'm saying to you, get some social workers. Get additional social workers. You need more social workers. Put them out in the field. Put them in the schools. Let them check Miss Pearl. Let them check every single child who is on the path before you cut them off. That's what we are saying. That's what we are saying. And Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, one moment. No. Prime Minister, I'm saying to you, it was not the policy before. I'm telling you, we can check. And I'm saying, instead of just cutting these children off the PART program, check with them first, no? Send them out, no? What is the material?
Mr.
No,
Daly.
but that's not the point. It's not the point. Prime Minister, your mom will tell you. She knows a lot about it.
Mr. Daly,
Yeah.
your time for speaking will expire. Let's see what the minister has to do.
I want
Order, please.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in a spirit of fair play, I'm going to ask that you extend the member's time for speaking by 5 minutes to enable him to complete his question.
Those in favor? Those against? As have it. Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know. Every time you talk the truth, people vex. All I'm saying to you is that before you cut them off so they can't get the little cash grant, for some of these part people is the only thing they have. The only thing. Put in the thing first and before you cut them off. So you must put in some social workers to make sure. Last year, in 2015, this Minister of Finance, I was in charge of the public service. We approved 300 social workers for the Ministry of Labor. 300 social workers we approved for the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Labor. They need some more because the behavioral problem our students face in school, these same social workers can help us with that, to help with the security of our country. Put some more security out there. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I know some people don't like to hear when you talk the truth, you know. But it's true. No, some people don't like to hear. But the title of my presentation is protecting the Jamaican workers and our most vulnerable. So I don't care what you want to say. What I'm saying is to protect the workers. I emphasize that the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, in conclusion,
please.
must do a better job to protect the workers and the most vulnerable among us. Minister, enforce the use of the GIC rate to end the exploitation of construction workers who are languishing, underpaid and abused. We intend to put it into law when we come back, but we will work with you now to do it. Minister, improve the situation for security guards who have no health care, no leave, nothing at all they have. The next PNP administration intends to do just that. Minister, increase the minimum wage, and I'm coming to Parliament on Friday if you call him the Parliament House Leader. We will come. Any day you call the Parliament. However late. As a matter of fact, even if you want to call me alone and announce it, tell me. Minister, increase the NI's pensions. No matter how small it is, Minister of Finance, this is for you. If inflation is 5%, give them the 5% to cover inflation, even but what? If, listen. Minister, resume the debate on OSHA and let us pass the bill before the summer recess in Parliament. I say to the government, bring the Disabilities Act into force now, no more delays. I say to the government, employ social workers, more social workers, to ensure better treatment of our path beneficiaries. I say to the Ministry of Labor, improve the farm work liaison service so that they can represent the interests of the farm workers better in the United States and Canada. Minister and government, administer the work permit law in fairness and in the interests of Jamaican workers. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as I close, we have to care about people's condition, and the Ministry of Labor and this government seems to be abandoning that responsibility to our workers and our pensioners, our elderly and the poor. But I say to the people of Jamaica, wherever you are, hold on, hold strain, because help is on the way. I thank you.
Order, please. Parliament is still in session. Order, please. The Parliament is still in session.
Public business, so you don't need to.
Minister Samudo.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will now take the motion to extend the zone of special operations and bring it to its conclusion. So we ask that he be allowed to do so at this time. We invite him to do that at this time, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favour? Those against? As of it. Prime Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You will permit me to comment on the presentation made by the member from Northern Client, and I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. It was truly a political speech. Mr. Speaker, we are here again to ask the House to approve the resolution for the extension of the zones of special operations for Mount Salem and Denham Town. In the case of Denham Town, we're asking for an extension. This would be the fourth time and the fifth time in the case of Mount Salem. Mr. Speaker, I wish to reiterate that there is no quick fix to the crime problem that we face. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that while we are seeing results, as the Minister of National Security would have pointed out in his presentation, the truth is that the symptoms would really be the murder rate and the other serious and dangerous crimes. But the real causal factors would be the breakdown of law and order in the communities. And the measures to deal with the breakdown of law and order are not quick fix measures. They require the concerted, determined, and consistent effort of the government. And the very presence of me in this Parliament for the fourth and fifth time asking for an extension shows that the government is determined and that the government is consistent in applying a policy not to address the symptoms, the murders and the dangerous and serious crimes, but to address the real causal factors, which is to fix the broken communities, especially in respect of the breakdown of law and order and the breakdown of community infrastructure and social services that are necessary to create the atmosphere in which the citizen can protect their own peace. Mr. Speaker, the progress made within these two communities, the Denham Town Zone of Special Operation and the Mount Salem Zone of Special Operation, must be allowed to continue. Therefore, acting on the advice of the National Security Council and in accordance with the law reform Zone of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act, and in accordance with Section 5 of the Act, which guides that the Prime Minister in Council after consultation with the Joint Command may by order, subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the period referred to in Section 4.3. It is being recommended that the Denham Town and Mount Salem zones of special operations, security measure and community development measures each be extended for a further period of 60 days. At this juncture, Mr. Speaker, I think the House is already at a point where if I were to move the amendment today, it would be universally agreed that 60 days is far too short and some other longer period should be considered. Mr. Speaker, we're coming up on the 1 year mark for the passage of the Zone of Special Operations Bill. And I'm just going off recollection. I believe that the period in the bill for review was 1 year. And I think I will await the 1 year mark and then come to the House, engage a process of review of the bill. So I'm placing the opposition on notice. And of course, we'll share the proposed amendments long before the review process so that at that point, the amendment can be seamless in terms of how it is done. Mr. Speaker, the Denham Town community was selected as Jamaica's second zone of special operation in October 2017, having met the established criteria for such law enforcement and social intervention. This included the presence of gang warfare, rampant criminality, escalating violence, and murder, and the threat to the rule of law and public order. While progress in the zone continues to be achieved, it has not been without its own inherent challenges. The joint force has, to a significant extent, maintained security and conducted coordinated internal security operations within its boundaries. Yet there have been a few incidents which have reminded us that the focus on this community must continue so as to ensure that it will never return to its state prior to the establishment of the zone. At the time, the community was plagued by serious crimes such as murder and shooting caused by the feuds with gangs present in and without Denham Town, particularly in the neighboring communities. This must never again be the reality of the citizens of Denham Town. Therefore, as the community continues to be guided through the bill phase, the joint force will continue to maintain the security of the zone. This will provide an opportunity within which the suite of social intervention programs can be effectively and safely implemented to benefit the residents of the community. The suite of social intervention programs include the enhancement of the physical environment. This includes the zinc fence substitution and integrated infrastructure projects. On the zinc fence removal project, we have gone now, Mr. Speaker, 400 meters of zinc fence being replaced. We're coming there. And we have employed over 30 persons in this project. The infrastructure improvement will provide water, sewage, and road improvement works through Denham Town. And just to be clear, Mr. Speaker, it is not Denham Town alone. The member from St. Andrew South, representing the adjoining communities, would know that the project extends between Denham Town and communities within St. Andrew South. There is also, Mr. Speaker, and just to give an update, that we are expecting that the contract for those civil works to do the infrastructure improvement will be with the Cabinet by July 2018. And we expect to execute those works over a 9-month period thereafter the approval of Cabinet. There is also the incentive program for proper management of solid waste. And Mr. Speaker, this is a program which we will have to study and figure out a way to scale up to other communities, indeed island-wide. As you would know, Mr. Speaker, the world is moving towards the control, if not the banning, of plastics in various forms. The form that has been most used is the banning of single-use plastics. But certainly there is a coordinated effort towards greater waste management, starting from how the citizen disposes of their waste. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is a program that I'm watching carefully to see the results from that program, the lessons learned, so that when we scale up this program to communities all across Jamaica, we have a modality that works. Mr. Speaker, we also have a focus on community safety. The support of the JCF Community Safety and Security Branch and JCF has developed the ICDP Community Safety Project. The project will include training to the JCF in customer service, human rights, and communication, undertaking stakeholder consultations and developing a community safety manual. This will inform the appropriate structure for neighborhood watch schemes among others, and support community youth groups with grants to develop their program. Mr. Speaker, I just want to spend a little time here on this program. After the security forces would have left the communities, we have been using the term that the community will have to own their peace. They will have to take charge of the peace, build the peace, and maintain the peace. It is absolutely important that we identify the leaders in the community and help them to build the institutions that will maintain the peace. The citizen what we call the community watch, the citizens watch, the community watch programs, those have played important roles in maintaining the peace and security of communities. The challenge, Mr. Speaker, is how do you promote it? How do you educate the citizens? How do you build their confidence so that after the security forces have left, they can take charge? And so what we are doing now is to actually train the security forces who are operating in the area, along with other social workers, to engage the citizens. Very important. With JSIF and other government agencies. And that is a strategic and a deliberate attempt to ensure that we have people who can be wardens of the peace, who can be justices of the peace, because some of them you would have to acknowledge their value and service to the community by making them justices of the peace and assigning them other tasks. And so that process, Mr. Speaker, is being engaged. Another undertaking, Mr. Speaker, has been the Safe Passages Program. This involves improvements in infrastructure, such as the upgrading of roads, sidewalks, drains, and as I said before, the rehabilitation of zinc fences, and importantly, the clearing of open lots. And this is ongoing in Denham Town. The effect of this, Mr. Speaker, why we are investing in this as a strategy, is that, and why it is called the Safe Passage, is that we are facilitating the movement of over 1,000 students within that area. You have St. Albans, you have Denham Town Primary, and Denham Town High School. And we want the students to be able to move freely in the community unimpeded, but also that there shouldn't be any infrastructure in place where someone could hide, someone could hang out, or find it difficult to traverse the area. So we are putting in that kind of infrastructure. And the reports generally are good, Mr. Speaker. The children are going to school more regularly, and certainly there is less crime targeted to them. Mr. Speaker, one important endeavor has been the school-wide behavior modification program. This program will be implemented in the St. Anne's, St. Albans, and the Denham Town Primary School, and in the Denham Town High School. This will address the issues of truancy and behavior modification among youth and adolescents. This program is a collaboration with JSIF, the Ministry of Education, and the Safe Schools program, and the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and it should commence in the new school year. There is also a focus on the expansion of public health services. In January 2018, the Ministry of Health commenced the provision of public health services to the community through weekend clinics, and I had mentioned that the last time that we had extended the zone in Denham Town. This continues. Additionally, there continues to be ongoing focus on skills training. A program to support further skills training has been approved and is currently in the procurement stage for service providers to provide new training areas and modalities. This will provide opportunities for youth in Denham Town to acquire new skills. And of course, additional support is being provided by the HOPE program through HEART NTA. Mr. Speaker, I now quickly move to Mount Salem, and you will understand that I'm moving through the items very quickly because the number of interventions are considerable and lengthy. Mr. Speaker, the Mount Salem community was selected as Jamaica's first zone of special operations in 2017. It has been acclaimed as a success by the residents, who have been the largest supporters of the intervention. Nevertheless, there is continued work that must take place. A measure of progress and sustainability of the strategic intent of the zone has always been to ensure that the community is in charge of its peace. To a significant extent, much has been achieved in this mission. This process of citizen empowerment is ongoing and has received the support of the residents, who are fully aware that there is no restriction on their rights and freedoms in the space. In fact, it is the citizens themselves who have been the main drivers of the transformational process. While this takes place, the presence of the security forces continues to be necessary to ensure an enabling environment. Since the declaration of the zone, the state, through the Social Intervention Committee, has coordinated the delivery of social services to the community. The interventions are guided by a social intervention framework approach, which was approved by Cabinet and which serves as a developmental roadmap with 7 development areas: the physical environment, land tenure, community safety, human and community development, employment, business and economic development, and spiritual and faith-based intervention and leadership. The social interventions have intensified since the transition to the build phase in February 2018, guided by the following approaches. So we are doing crime prevention through environmental design, where the focus is on road improvement, works, water regularization, drain cleaning, and solid waste management and rodent control. Mr. Speaker, if you visit Mount Salem today, you would agree, provided of course that you had visited a year ago, that Mount Salem is a cleaner community. I get the reports, Mr. Speaker. We have environmental wardens who have been very effective. We know, I believe we are now at a point where the residents have internalized proper waste disposal. And I'm saying it for the Member of Parliament's hearing, that I believe we could now scale up in the community to move towards garbage separation. As a pilot, I think we could do that here. So I'm not saying, I don't have to say that we are doing roads. I can now say we have done the roads. I can say that the zinc fence removal is in progress. I can say that the drains have been cleaned and are continuing the works. The argument that it takes a ZOSO to do it is unassailable. But the point of fact is, the ZOSO is doing it. That's the point of fact. So the entire suite of environmental and physical intervention to improve, it is working there. That is working. But what I find that the other part of the strategy, which is crime prevention through social development, that is also working very well. Anecdotally, when I received the reports on what's happening in Mount Salem, there was an attempt by a group of youngsters to keep a dance in the area. 20 of them. It was not approved. So this is a public order issue. The joint force went there and, following the laws, but very respectfully, closed it down. That was a turning point, I believe, in how the community embraced the zone of special operations. Because from what I understand, and I'm just going by the report, was that the 20 young men who kept, it was 12, well to court, but it was 20 of them. They did it, it would appear, as a deliberate challenge to the authority. And the citizens were watching the reaction of the joint force to see whether or not the joint force would actually maintain the rule of law. Because these were, quote unquote, some of the tough guys in the community. And the way in which the joint force operated, there was no abuse of rights. It was a straight enforcement, and the persons involved were prosecuted. They were taken to court, but the process was that they went to mediation. And during the process of mediation, and in speaking to them, even the tough guys, they ended up acknowledging and now are a part of the process of maintaining the peace. Many of them got jobs as wardens and starting to help to maintain the cleanliness of the place. And so it was a very good experience. If we could manage to get this kind of experience scale up right through some of the communities, you could imagine the dramatic change that would take place in our country. I just wanted to report that kind of experience, as these are the real success stories to be told. By and large, I think we have a very good case study to make with Mount Salem. The next challenge now, members, is to how do we scale this now to other communities? And that is indeed the consideration of the government. How do we scale it? So we are now examining resources that are available, new budgetary allocations that have to be made, and as the member from South St. Catherine always points out, along with the member from Central Manchester, the human resources in the security forces that it takes to do it, which is a very serious consideration. So all of that is being contemplated, well, far more than contemplated, it is being now developed and designed as to how we can address the resource issues in terms of finance and the human resource issues as to how this would be policed. As I've said in the House before, there are 20 communities, which if we manage to get a hold of those 20 communities, we could have a long-term island-wide, long-term sustainable reduction in crime. So, Mr. Speaker, I won't go through all the interventions because I had mentioned many of them before, but there is a regularization of electricity. We're regularizing water, and the citizens, you're not hearing complaints, people understand that they have to pay, but there is the mediation between the utilities. But the other area I wanted to point out, Mr. Speaker, is that bringing the peace to the area has now given hope for the regularization of the community. Because those of you who would know the history of the community, not all of the community is formally settled. In fact, a large part of it is informally settled. But the peace that the community is having now has made owners of lands in proximity start to look at these lands through a different lens. That the peace is bringing now the prospect of economic development. In other words, lands that people own that they felt could not be developed because of the community that is adjoining it. These lands now have economic value because they see the long-term potential for Mount Salem to be a good neighboring community. And so what you're finding now, Mr. Speaker, is that there are possibilities that people who own the land that was informally settled would be now willing to enter into some conversation about making it regular, if you understand the euphemism, Mr. Speaker. In other words, the people whose land has been informally settled recognize the value of regularizing those persons there in order to get the benefit of the long-term sustained peace so that they can develop other lands in the area. And that is, Mr. Speaker, a profound example of the success of the zone. If we were able to get communities that are constantly at war onto a long-term path for peace, development would find its way to their doorstep. Because the truth is, many of these communities are on lands with great economic potential, but the crisis of murder, extortion, and other serious crimes drives away the investment. No bank wants to give a mortgage. And so bringing peace has an economic benefit, and we are beginning to see that emerging in Mount Salem. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, as we speak, and I'm knocking on wood, no one has been killed in Mount Salem. Of course, we know the situation in Denham Town, but since we have scaled up the operations there, peace has reigned and there has been no murders in Denham Town. Let me say that the absence of murder in the community and the absence of shooting doesn't mean that there is an absence of intent or an absence of violence. In the Denham Town community, we see many reports coming in of people getting into fights, domestic fights, using knives and stones. And in Denham Town, in Mount Salem, less so, but still, there is the interpersonal and domestic issues which drive the violence. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, that because of the presence of the security forces, these domestic, intimate partner, and interpersonal issues have not escalated to murder. I make the point that when you look at Jamaica's murder rate, though a substantial portion of it is driven by gangs, a significant part of it is driven by interpersonal, domestic, and intimate partner issues. So, Mr. Speaker, the issue of of interpersonal violence is something that, as a parliament, as a country, we will have to address. Violence is just too much a feature of our day-to-day social transactions. We have not had an explicit program in the zone of special operations to treat with the issue of violence, but tangentially, all the social intervention programs, including the parenting and the other behavior modification programs, treat with violence. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm giving notice to the House that the government will develop a program specifically to deal with violence. I don't know if you share this concern, but I feel that violence is almost becoming a feature of our culture. And we should never allow, well, maybe it's long become, but we should never allow it to become deep-seated. And we have to address it frontally. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the message of the success of the zones and the operations, which, Mr. Speaker, to be clear, I am not here trying to own it. I think it is better that the success is a shared success, and that though it is very laborious, sometimes even stressful, to come to Parliament to give these reports, it is good that the public understands that though there has been very limited, I can't even say suspension, but there's been a very limited curtailment of some rights, that the people who are in the zones are safer and better off for it, and that the people in the zones want the zones of special operations to continue. So, Mr. Speaker, let me again ask for the extension of the Denham Town and Mount Salem zones of special operations for an additional 60 days. Mr. Speaker, I put it to the House for its consideration.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House will recall that at the very outset, when the zones of special operation was introduced, our concern expressed then is the extent to which it represents an answer to the ever-increasing crime rate, and particularly murders and shootings in Jamaica. The Prime Minister indicated the reductions which have taken place in the two existing zones. In the case of Mount Salem, it exists within a state of emergency parish. So from a security standpoint, the state of emergency overwhelms the security provisions within the state of, within the zone of special operation. Mr. Speaker, with 24-hour security of the JDF and the police, crime must go down. So it is not a surprise or a great revelation that you don't have those murders or you don't have those shootings with that kind of presence. We didn't expect otherwise. The fact is, though, we can't have a policeman and a soldier at every door and every gate of every Jamaican. That's what's not possible. But in the case where you have that level of security presence, it is not a news. We don't want even one murder or one shooting to occur anywhere in Jamaica. The issue, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the ZOSOs in these areas doesn't represent a dealing with the problem in Jamaica, but rather dealing with the murders and the shootings in just those specific areas. As I speak, Mr. Speaker, there's an overall reduction in the murder year on year, last year over this year, but it is still higher than the year before. No. The point I'm making, The point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, this time in 2016 it was 530. Now it is 610. Last year it was 661. So it is less than last year. Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of National Security made his presentation a few moments ago, he alluded to the data where by United Nations standard, it is 30 in 100,000 for civil disturbance. In the case of St. James, 160. The point I'm making is that it is phenomenally high already. So when you're laughing about the fact that it is lower now, but still lower than 2016, betrays the point. So, Mr. Speaker, we welcome the reduction. Why I refer to these numbers is because when you take out St. James as a parish, and for where we had the high numbers of murders, and you look at the Denham Town, in the Kingston metro area, the increase is 24% over last year, in the Kingston metro area. That's the police data. Higher than it was last year. Those are not my opinion, that's a matter of fact. The fact I'm speaking to, Mr. Speaker, is that we have Jamaicans being murdered and we have high levels of shooting. The point I wish to make is that while we welcome the reduction in murders and shootings, we can't take it as we don't want to get into a false sense of safety, because it's not. What we want, for example, is for the reduction in other areas. Because as I say, when you take out those ZOSO areas, the numbers are increasing. That's not an opinion. And the people who are experiencing these murders in their communities, that's their realities. That's their reality. I must speak to it. The government, all of us must speak to it. Because if we don't, the people are going to say we are denying them or ignoring them. So, Mr. Prime Minister, we welcome the reduction. Yes, really. Because I know some of those persons who are being affected too. Right? Persons in my own constituency and people who I meet along the way. Well, I won't talk about committing, because they talk about committing. The Minister of National Security spoke about corruption as a critical element in the crime fighting. We read in the newspaper just a few days ago about a police operation where over $30 million in cash was seized, right? Which is a clear case of corruption, and high-end vehicles, and over 10 Rolex watches, right? And a report of connection with high-profile politician, right? In fact, no, that is what was reported. I didn't make up the story. I read it in the newspaper. The Gleaner. Yes. And Mr. Speaker, my information is that the 30 million reach up to $50 million in cash. Right?
Order, please.
So, as you mentioned about activities, those in keeping with the point made by the Minister of National Security, it is a point of concern. And we would have loved to hear, where that is. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, we have oftentimes asked about the cost. With every activity of government and every intervention, there is a cost associated with it. And the cost is the cost that the country has to face. Mr. Prime Minister, you have given many undertakings in this House that you will provide the cost. On a couple of occasions before, you say they don't have the information now, but you'll get it and you'll provide it. Mr. Prime Minister, that is yet to come. You have spoken about the many extensions we are going through now, requests for extension. We ask for it each time, and up to now you don't provide that. So we, as a country, we don't have any appreciation for the level of investment that we need to make to get the returns that we want. Is that unreasonable? Is that unreasonable, Mr. Prime Minister? Because at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers have to pay the cost to meet the security need. We welcome the social intervention. It is indispensable. But, Mr. Prime Minister, you'll also recall, from the first time of the debate on the extension of the first, I posed to you the question of what are the intervention in the near ZOSO areas. And by this I mean in other communities that has the profile or the data that would cause a ZOSO to come in effect? What sort of intervention is contemplated in those communities to avoid them graduating, rather elevated, to the point where you have to impose a ZOSO or a state of emergency? And I think the former Minister of National Security also concurred with that too. And what I would like to get from you, Prime Minister, what are the interventions, social interventions in those areas? I raised the national figures. I raised the national figures to make the point, simple point, Mr. Prime Minister, that the murders are committing in other areas, and much the same way that the interventions are being made to reduce the murders and the shooting in those areas. We can't just celebrate those alone without intervening in the other areas where the high murders are being committed. That is the context in which I gave these national figures. And I refer to, for example, the Kingston metro area. My colleague from Southwest St. Andrew and South made a plea on the last occasion about the social intervention, because in their constituencies, the murders and the shootings have not stabilized. They are increasing. In fact, if you look at the St. Andrew South data up to the police data up to this weekend, it's an increase of up to over 24%. Right? It's up 47%. So there's a huge increase in these other areas. We can't, Mr. Prime Minister, take comfort in these reductions where you have these interventions as if that is all of Jamaica. In those areas where the increases are taking place, there are Jamaicans who are living in fear and distress. We as a country and as a government have a responsibility to them also. So yes, we welcome these reductions, but we can't leave the rest of Jamaica behind. We can't ignore them as if their lives and their communities are not equally important. So Mr. Prime Minister, we will support the extension. But our support for the extension is not to say all is well and that is enough. A lot more need to be done. He never said that, but I am saying where our concerns are. We represent all of Jamaica. We do not represent specific areas, all of Jamaica. And therefore, we welcome intervention strategies that can relieve the stress for the residents and people of Jamaica in the other parts of Jamaica outside of the ZOSO areas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the two motions, but as a member from St. James West Central, in which the Mount Salem zone falls, you will understand my special emphasis on that zone. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has already recounted the successes that have resulted from the declaration of the zone in the Mount Salem community and environs area. Mr. Speaker, among the things I'd like to say on behalf of the residents of Mount Salem is thank you to the members of the Honorable House for granting the extension or indicating a willingness to extend the work. That is being done. Mr. Speaker, the citizens have been saying that their concerns about the level of professionalism that they once had are no longer there, because what they have seen from the joint force in the zone is encouraging. And I think it is something that as a parliament we should celebrate, given the many concerns that were initially raised. Already, Mr. Speaker, the high level of professionalism displayed by the joint force has translated into increased trust and confidence by the citizens in the security forces. I think for me, as the representatives of the people, Mr. Speaker, I see citizens taking ownership for the development of their community. I have seen a marked change in how the residents show up for meetings. And it tells us, Mr. Speaker, that the policy that we have translated into law of combining security operations with social intervention is indeed a recipe for success in improving safety and security. Mr. Speaker, the concerns are noted, but we have to start somewhere, and this was the idea behind the zone. I have witnessed a transformation in citizen relations in the area that is encouraging, and on behalf of the constituents, I say thank you. May it so please you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. McNeil, Mrs. Cook.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, you, in discussing the ZOSO and the extension, you made the point that to do it, there are two elements. One was the symptoms, which you said was sort of the murders and the crime, and the other side was the causal elements, which is the breakdown of law and order and the social problems. Fortunately for me, the last time we had a discussion like this, a month ago, when I rose to speak, was the same day that we had the unfortunate affairs in Great Hill. Luckily for me and for us, today we don't have that problem. But I would say to you that, given what you have explained, there are two elements, and you said in the ZOSOs there are two elements of fighting the crime. One is the security forces, increased security forces, and the other one is the social programs that go along with it. And I think we on this side have been saying for a long time that that is something that needs to be brought to the wider Jamaica. It is a real issue that we're facing. There's no doubt that Westmoreland has a problem. The murder rate, certainly there were, I think 1 month we were #1 in Jamaica. It's really been a problem. And as I said, in Grange Hill a month ago, we had almost a massacre, 8 persons killed, 18 shot, a real problem. Now, Mr. Speaker, at the time that happened, we got one half of the equation. The Minister of National Security came down, Commissioner of Police, there was a whole intervention, and we have gotten an increase in security forces. And in the immediate period, even though we didn't have a state of emergency or so, I think in the first few days, there were 80 persons detained and maybe 15 or 20 arrested. And the murders have gone down, although we have seen some subsequently, including the killing of the Peace Management Initiative representative for Negril, which in of itself is very troubling. Mr. Prime Minister, what I'm getting at with this is that we have the increased security presence, and we're happy for that. But there's a real problem with regard to the social component. We in Westmoreland have started our part. Immediately after, in the following week, I had a meeting. We met with I think about 14 JPs, the principals of the schools, the teachers, the pastors, the wider community. And in the discussion, we put together a committee, and working with me through that committee with SDC and other agencies, we're working on some social programs, outreach programs, youth programs, sports. We're even using some of the HOPE. I put my HOPE allocation in there to get it working. And I've told them that they are for the youth. And I've told them that what they're doing, and a lot of it is my funding through CDF, trying to get those social programs going. Up to this morning, myself and Member of Parliament Vaz and the Mayor, we were on a phone call with the Superintendent of Police having a discussion because he's discussing the fact that he needs to get the market cleaned up and the taxi stand because he's trying to restore law and order, the same things you're speaking about. But, Mr. Prime Minister, the difficulty we have is we have seen absolutely no government intervention other than when the Minister of National Security came down. Not one minister has come to meet with us as political representatives, to meet with the wider community to discuss how we're going to put in these same social programs. It cannot be, Prime Minister, that you can only get this if you get a state of emergency or so.
That is what is
it cannot be the only way. So what we want is these programs for us to be together in trying to resolve some of these programs before we get to that stage. Without getting to that stage.
What is wrong with him?
So, Mr. Prime Minister,
What are you saying?
I think that everyone is waiting on some sort of program. We are doing what we can, but it is going to need the government intervention. You spoke of things like increased social workers. Look at things like in the meeting, they talk about the street lights, they talk about some of the roads. We would like you talk about Mount Salem and the fact that it is so clean, we would like Westmoreland and Grangehill to be like that with solid waste. So what I'm really doing is asking you, please, could we immediately, given the problems we have had, could we get the intervention of the ministers with responsibility for us to work out a program to make this work?
You are the government
because
now.
if not, Prime Minister, it is my feeling that it will only be a matter of time before we see ourselves back in the media with some other tragic event. So we on this side, and I, as a Member of Parliament, and my colleagues, Val and Buchanan, pledge to work with you if we can get the government assistance to make these social programs come true for our people and our constituents in Westmoreland. Thank you, Mr.
Dr. Mr. Speaker, just to speak? Well, it's all right. You can speak after. No, it's all right. I think the important, Mr. Speaker.
You must clean the market and clean the garbage now. That's your duty. Not about what he was doing 2 years ago.
I really want to speak just on one small aspect of the issues raised. I don't think anyone here is opposing the concept of a ZOSO, and no one here is opposing the extension. I think everyone would agree, including the government, that while there may have been definite positive effects in the areas where the ZOSO has been introduced, nevertheless, while an answer for those communities, there is an overarching problem that still exists in the country. But that is not what I am intending to debate. I think the critical ingredient that everyone considers to be positive is the social intervention component. But there are still some issues that we have to address. One of those issues is, even in the social interventions, are we focusing sufficiently on the root problems generating the violence. And I refer here to some of the work done at the University of the West Indies, Professor Gale, which work points to the existence of what you might call pathological violence and pathological individuals who have to be identified early in the school system and in their family system if we are in fact going to cauterize and prevent further development of the social pathology that this violence represents. That is to say, as you have said, we over the years we are generating more and more violence, and indeed it has become a feature in many communities of normal cultural, social interaction to too great a degree. Now, so while we may go through and rebuild basketball court and rebuild, which is desirable, remove the zinc fence and replace it, which is desirable, clean up the garbage, which is desirable, if we don't address the heart of this issue of what is generating this pathological behavior, then we are really going to be spending a lot of money without securing adequate benefit, because it is almost going to be as if we will have to keep the security forces in perpetuity in these communities unless we are able to address that question. I believe, Prime Minister, which leads me really to the suggestion I want to make. A review, the one-year review, is upon us. I think it's September 1st or somewhere around there. It may be, I want to propose that the government, whether through the National Security Council or maybe in collaboration with the opposition, constitute an expert body, including your security forces, but including other knowledgeable persons, other expertise, to do a study of the differences, of the performance, first of all, in the two communities where we have had them declared thus far. Look at the positives, the negatives, the possible areas of underemphasis, so that by the time the review is upon us, we can in fact have the benefit of this expert study, or as close to that point as possible. Because ultimately, we need a solution. The country needs a solution to the problem of runaway violence. And even in the communities where we have had a reduction, what we are seeing, as we saw last weekend at Mayfair Hotel, is that killers, apparently contract killers, apparently contract killers, still operate with impunity. It's just a matter. It happened there. It happened on Ruthven Road a few months earlier. It happened elsewhere. It is something that is not the community alone that is the answer. It is the generation of the gangs and the persons with the interest in killing. A lot of data has been provided here. But the data that I don't know, and which we may need, I don't know in the communities, how many gangs have been dismantled? Are there gangs still, albeit incipient? Is it that the gangs, maybe the data doesn't exist? Is it that they're just not committing the crimes there, but they are moving elsewhere? What are the economic drivers of the gangs in those communities? Is it scamming? Is scamming less? Can we get a report? Because the great concern is what is the cost of these interventions in these areas? And to what extent is that cost not just a cost in absolute economic terms, but an opportunity cost, because we can't intervene elsewhere where killers are still operating with impunity. This issue doesn't need to divide us as a kind of an issue of seeking political one-upmanship. Because if crime, which has grown over decades, if it continues to beset us in the way that it is besetting us now, then we are forfeiting the future upon us. So I think if we can find some of these answers, do the analysis, it will allow us not to just keep coming here saying Mount Salem is all right, Denham Town getting all right, but everywhere else is a fire, and other people feel aggrieved, as we are about to hear from my colleague in Southwest St. Andrew, with good reason. With good reason. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, permission to speak from a seat other than my own.
Let's go ahead, you may.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my 2 cents to the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures for Denham Town, community and Mount Salem, and the extension of period of operation number 3 order resolution 2018. I listened very carefully to the presentation made by the Prime Minister, and as most others would have said, I am pleased at what is happening in Denham Town and Mount Salem. As usual, my concern lies with the persons who have sent me here. And so when I stand, I really am forced to stand because I made a commitment to the people of Southwest St. Andrew to defend their interests. And once an issue arises where I feel that they are on the wrong side of what we are doing, that we are not helping, I am duty-bound to stand and add my voice, because they cannot come in here and speak. When I last spoke, there are a couple of issues that we had, certainly I had, with the ZOSO. One was the fact that it was not an effective, comprehensive crime-fighting tool. The other was precisely that things are going well in the areas that we are concentrating, but elsewhere, that is not so. I had a chance to just glimpse through, and I listened attentively to the Minister of National Security as he spoke earlier. And as I listened to him speak about what was happening in terms of crime, and I went through, I did not hear anything about crime really outside of Mount Salem and Denham Town. And I think that that is my concern, that at some point it seems as if Mount Salem and Denham Town is the only place where it's at. And so I am concerned about that. I would have loved, for example, if the minister had in fact even made some mention of what is happening elsewhere, so that I could be comforted that he is also still concerned about those numbers and that they bother him as much as they bother those of us who live elsewhere. St. Andrews South, Mr. Speaker, have had between January 1 and June 9th, 75 murders and 67 shootings. In terms of murder, it has gone down since we have been looking at it this closely, but it is still 47% above the 2017 numbers. 47% above those 2017 numbers. Shootings have gone down, and the increase over last year is about 5%, so that's trending in the right direction, and we're pleased to hear that. But when you come to robberies, when you come to break-ins, again, we're talking about significant increases over last year. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is that the individuals who live and work in Southwest St. Andrew are traumatized daily. I hear the members shouting about how many gangs there are. What I can tell you is that I can count 10 areas of conflict, and I'm not talking about 10 communities or 10 little sections, no. 10 active battles that are ongoing in Southwest St. Andrew. 10 battles. And we're not talking about 10 gangs. We're talking about 10 battles with several gangs, I would imagine is what it's called, involved in each. So when I stand to speak, understand that I'm not standing because I'm troublesome or because I like to hear my own voice. No, I'm standing because I have the responsibility and the obligation of coming here in the Parliament to speak on behalf of the individuals, whether they are in Union Gardens, whether they are on any of that Maxfield Avenue stretch, whether they are on Kid Lane, Bowens Road, whether they are at top or bottom Crescent Road, whether they are in Delacree, and I could go on, Whitfield, Swetnam, Wellington Road, and I could go on and name them. And this is their life every day. When I spoke, some persons have said to me, why did I speak and spend so much time talking about the issue of street lights? Is it that important? Mr. Speaker, I have spoken about the street lights because it is that important. What does that have to do with ZOSO? That's the point I'm making. If it is that the government has, if you listen, you will understand it, since members on that side are saying they do not understand. Give me 2 minutes and listen, and you will understand. The reason why I raise streetlights is that I do not believe that we need ZOSO to have streetlights fixed. If in fact the government is serious about reducing crime, if in fact we are serious about taking away the opportunity of darkness, then, Mr. Speaker, I want to suggest to the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security that a discussion needs to be had with the Minister of Local Government, with JPSCO, so that these areas where we have this heightened level of criminal activities, of murders, of shootings, of robberies, of break-ins, of rapes, that effort needs to be put into it so that we can have our street lights fixed, our main roads, our main community roads, so that individuals, as they take their kids to school or as they come home from work, they can come home in relative safety. I believe that that is the least That's a basic requirement of government, any government. And therefore, when we come to talk about ZOSO, what I want to hear is what we have done about making sure that those areas like St. Andrew South, that has seen an increase, a 47% increase between January 1 and June 9th, that we can see the streetlights placed, that we can have the comfort that the government cares about the individuals who live and work in St. Andrew South. And in this sense, I know I speak on behalf of the member of South St. Andrew who is not here, and on behalf of the member of Western St. Andrew. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I speak...
Order, please.
In fact, Mr. Speaker, I also speak on behalf of the Member of Parliament of West Central St. Andrew. I also speak on his behalf because we share that. When you're in here, you can't speak on that behalf. Leave that at home. Right here, I speak on his behalf because we share a police division. And I believe that the very least that we can do is provide street lights. Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, members, for thank you, members, for your contribution to the extension of the thank you, members, for your contribution to the debate on the resolution for the extension of the zones of special operations. Mr. Speaker, I would want to empathize even with the member from Western Westmoreland on the challenges that he faces in that constituency. He's in the right place. Well, Mr. Speaker, the member did not mention, but he would have lost a friend as well in the series of murders that happened in the area. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Westmoreland got my direct attention because when the incident happened, I had a discussion with the Jamaica Social Investment Fund to find out what was their presence in the parish. Indeed, there are communities in Westmoreland that would qualify for a zone of special operation. Again, the question of how much it will cost, and well, as I said, there are 20 around the island. Now, there is significant presence in the Russia community in Salem South, and I am speaking with the Jamaica Social Investment Fund to see what are the possibilities to assist Granger. So I will be in touch with you directly to see how we can assist in that area. I start at that point. I start at that point to answer the question that was raised by the member from St. Catherine South regarding whether or not there can be provision of service and development assistance targeted to communities around zones of special operations. As I had mentioned before, South St. Andrew is benefiting. That's the way that one is being done. Yes, they're part of much of the infrastructure work, but it is not a policy that this will be the case for all communities in which zones are present. I want to make the point, however, that the Social Investment Fund, through the Citizen Security and Justice Program, through, what was the other program? The CSJP Basic Initiative, precisely, and several other programs have been operating in many of these troubled communities. They know, and they still do now. The issue has always been, how do we provide the security element to ensure that the investments made in community development can actually work? I have seen, for example, when I tour communities in St. James was not a parish that did not have social intervention. Significant social intervention was placed in St. James. I have toured communities there. I see community centers. I see all kinds of programs. But what was absent was the coordinated effort of social intervention and security intervention. And that is what the zones of special operations, special community measures is designed to do. We have now placed this within the context of a law. So that social interventions will be supported by the security intervention. So the point that is being made by the opposition spokesman on national security, government can't afford to put a policeman at every citizen's door. Obviously, government can't do that. But you have to acknowledge that where there is a breakdown in the rule of law, a breakdown in public order, where criminals feel that they can murder with impunity, that the response of the state must be to ensure that the security presence is elevated and felt. And that is what we have done. There is a kind of spurious argument being made. And I hear the leader of the opposition eloquently articulating this argument, this narrative, that we are bringing security to 2 communities while the rest of Jamaica is burning down. As if to say that A, there was not a security issue in the rest of Jamaica before the zones of special operations. As if to say that bringing security to the areas where it was elevated has not helped to bring security to the entire island. Because the undeniable fact is that whilst there might be differences in various areas, some areas crime is going up, another area crime is going down. But taken as a whole, crimes are going down. So the strategy, we have to acknowledge that there is some benefit to the strategy. There's a benefit to the strategy. And the other thing that we have to acknowledge, yes, is that displacement is a legitimate security strategy. It's not the first time that we have tried, and especially when you're dealing with gangs. Yes, and we are measuring it. And I will go a little bit more into that discussion in terms of, because the question, you had asked a question about how are we tracking the results, how are we measuring the results. And I take the suggestion that there needs to be a study. And when we go to National Security Council, I will put it on the table about doing a study on the 2 zones so that we have objective information to make further decisions as we seek to scale them up. But I'm very happy, Leader of the Opposition, that you pointed out the pathology of violence. You would recognize in my opening presentation that I had acknowledged that we did not in the zone have a policy or a program that was specific to address violence, and that we acknowledge that violence, no, we have to address violence as opposed to crime and violence. As though we are dealing with crime with a specific strategy, we have to deal with violence now with a specific strategy. Because all the studies are showing that violence is a disease. It is a disease, and it has the pathology of a disease. And we have to treat with it in that way. Unfortunately, within our country, we have normalized violence. So we don't even treat it as an abnormality in our culture and our behavior. So I'm happy that the leader of the opposition has pointed that out. The studies are pointing it out, and the country has to put in place measures to treat with violence. Mr. Speaker, I hear the member from Southwest, St. Andrew, making the impassioned plea about street lights and other kinds of support. St. Andrew South has turned out this year, it wasn't last year or the year before, but this year it has become a problem. We are now 24 murders ahead of where we were last year. The challenge has been clearly a number of communities. It's a very dense area. It has in it some of the most dangerous gangs. It has some of the most dangerous gangs in the country. And the proximity to the economic center. That has to be addressed. And I make clear I'm not going to, again, give away strategic intent. But I want to signal clearly that the government will not allow St. Andrew South to get out of hand. I want that to be, well, I'm not going to, no, what has happened is that it had a high spike earlier in the year, and we have managed now to taper it. Yes, we have managed to taper it. But I want, it can be interpreted in any way it wants to be interpreted. But the full suite of action to ensure that St. Andrew South does not get out of control will be implemented. We are 100% resolved on that. And I want to say, just for the benefit of the House, that the government is not relying only on states of emergency and zones of special operations. What happened to regular policing? Regular policing, exactly, regular policing is an important part of the crime-fighting strategy. And so far, the new commissioner has emphasized that. And as the leader of the opposition pointed out, that was a strategy employed in Grange Hill. So the government will be ensuring that regular policing is effective. That is the first call of response. And, Mr. Speaker, so far, we have seen that the police have been acting in ways that have been, I would say, extremely effective in curbing and controlling much of the crime. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, we in this House have the responsibility to give a unified face to the public in the fight against crime. And I think this zone of special operation resolution, as it has been debated, is a good signal to the public that the government and the opposition can work in areas of agreement to be at one in ensuring that the people of Jamaica are protected. I commend the bill for the resolution for the approval of the House.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. So I ask that we adjourn this House until the 19th, next Tuesday.
1 minute.
When we will...
Members, the House has not... The House is still in session, please.
19th at 2 p.m. when we will debate the CARICOM report that was tabled in the Honourable House. We are expecting to have a lively and constructive debate. So we will have no sectoral presentations next week, Tuesday. And indeed, we will not be bringing, at this point, will have no intention of bringing any matters to the House on Tuesday when we convene for that debate on the report. We will reintroduce the sectoral debates the following Tuesday. Yes. No. Adjourning until next Tuesday, the 19th, specifically designed to debate the CARICOM report that was finalized by a committee headed by the former Prime Minister, Honorable Bruce Golding. Like who? So, Mr. Speaker, I invite you to suspend this Honourable House until Tuesday of next week.
Mr. Semudo, I don't know whether you have set June 19th for a special day. Members, the House stands adjourned until the 19th of June, a special day in the history of Jamaica, at 2 p.m.
Did you know that the EU has been doing a lot of work in Jamaica? The EU has funded extensive improvement to health facilities in sugar-dependent areas.